Oh, and we have someone new join us.
Yes, Mandy, it's Jeanette.
Oh, hey, Jeanette, how's it going today?
It's great today. How are you?
Oh, I feel even greater hearing your cheerful voice.
Oh, good. It hasn't been cheerful. I haven't been well, but I am on the mend.
Oh, you know, I've had the terrible, crusty flu this whole last week, and I'm finally better. So I feel your pain.
I think knowing how horrible life can be gives you this feeling that everything's really cool. Here's somebody else. Hi. Hi. This is Shayla. Hey, Shayla.
Hey, Shayla.
Jeanette.
So I'll get started with some reminders, and I'm sure we'll have some other people connecting in. Just my first reminder is your timesheets for January 1st through 15th are due by the 20th, so you can fill them out today. I know some of you have already turned them in. Thank you. But just for the rest of you to remember to fill those out. And then we have some exciting stuff coming up. Next Wednesday, which is January 21st at 10 o'clock, we have a webinar on digital media. And I'm really excited about it. I did like a test with the presenter just to make sure everything worked, and she showed me a couple of the things she's going to share. So she's a real expert in all different types of digital media, especially like ebooks, audiobooks. So if you have any questions about different services, you know, I would really encourage you to ask her. Her name's Ann Kennedy, and I forget her exact title. I believe it's Digital Media Services Manager at Licking County. So she is an excellent person to ask about all your ebook questions. And then we haven't scheduled it yet, but Evan and I are putting our heads together, and we may send out a poll to you to find a shorter online meeting in February. We were thinking we might be able to slip away without a February meeting, but then we remembered performance evaluations are coming up, and we know that you guys will have lots of questions about them and the procedure. It's all still the same thing in your handbook. It's all still true, but sometimes it's helpful just to kind of talk it over. So we will be sending out some kind of poll to schedule that. It'll probably be on a Friday, and we will record it for those folks who can't attend. One thing I'm really excited to tell you is we took another look at our budget, and we are able to bring everybody together at the end of March, on March 30th, for an all-core in-person meeting here at the State Library. We will have mileage reimbursement for this, so don't let that be a barrier. We do have a snow date if a lot of places, if we get a late snow and if more than half of us can't attend. But I mean, we're all spread out across the state. If your particular area is having, you know, weather there, like you have an ice storm, you have a late snow, and you yourself cannot make it out, don't risk it. The most important thing is to both Evan and myself, yes, is always your health and safety. So just use your best judgment. I'll try to look at the weather report. I'll get up early, yuck, which I hate. But I will for you guys and look at the weather report and see if anywhere is supposed to get a torrential snowfall. But that'll be on March 30th. We're still writing the agenda. If there are particular trainings that you guys are really interested in having, please let us know. I think at this point we are, the agenda is pretty open. We have not only someone join us, but also doing their sound test. Hello?
Hello, Mandy, this is Tim.
Oh, hey, Tim, how's it going?
It's been crazy today.
Oh, okay. I understand.
But I'm doing it.
Okay.
All right, good.
some other awesome things we have coming up. On April 7th, we have something called Mayor's Day. I'd like to explore us participating in this. It's just a day to connect with local government, typically a mayor, but as you can probably tell from the title. AmeriCorps does have some resources that they can supply, but we'll be talking to your site supervisors next week about, do we want to reach out to mayors in your area and have them, write something about like, I support national service, or volunteerism is important in our community, or just to have you guys reach out to mayors to just let them know the good work that you guys are doing in the community. So that is on April 7th, and we should have more details on that soon. And other exciting things, we have a Life After AmeriCorps conference coming up on April 24th. That is also here at the State Library. And it is exactly what it sounds. We're going to have a conference, so different sessions on different topics, including like resume reviews, grad school information, all different kinds of things to talk about, what are some next steps for you guys as, the AmeriCorps year, we won't be finished by then, but we'll be, thinking about what your next steps are. So that's all the updates I have for you. Evan, am I missing any updates?
No, I think, yeah, you mentioned the in-person meeting. You mentioned evaluations will be coming up a little bit later. Yeah, I think we're pretty good on announcements.
So my question to all of you guys are, and if you are connecting only via the computer, go up to the top right-hand corner of your screen and click on chat, and you can type it into me. But just for those of you who haven't checked in, how are your MLK plans shaping up?
I'm doing pretty good down here in Brown County. We've actually gotten a lot of monetary donations. We've been running it all week, so we've got over $300 plus a whole bunch of stuff. So I'll be delivering it on Monday.
That's wonderful.
Great. Mandy, I'm totally excited and pumped about what I'm going to be doing on Monday. We're going down to downtown Youngstown. We're going to close up some homes that have been vacant, and it's going to be a work day, but it's going to be outdoors. So I'm a little afraid of my health. I will, bundle up and take good care of myself, but hopefully work with plenty of good people and get something done.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
Here at Athens, we have the drive all set up for the puppies.
Aww.
It's going to go through until I think it's the 23rd, and then as I go to each building the week after, I'll collect everything to take it to the Friends of the Shelter Dogs.
That's wonderful. April has shared via chat that she will be at Journey's End on MLK Day. Journey's End is a local food pantry and clothing outlet, which is excellent. Well, I know that I'm so glad to hear about you guys on the call. I know not everyone has had the success that they had hoped for with, collecting things for animal shelters, but I know you all have done your best. And from my perspective, what else can be asked from you than you try?
Right.
So, like I've said to a couple of you, we will have other opportunities. Mayor's Day is an excellent opportunity. While it's not a service project, it is important to let local government just know what else is going on, and we may have some other opportunities. We'll see. There's a week in March called AmeriCorps Week, which is a celebration of you. that we may think of different ways we can highlight the wonderful job that you guys are doing. And I think it's a bit short to plan a service project for March, but there's another opportunity, Youth Service Day. We haven't been given an exact date for that yet. But what I'm getting at is not to fret.
Right.
We know you're doing wonderful work. We hear it from your site supervisors all the time. We get press clippings from all over the state. So we feel good, and we hope you guys feel good. Oh, and Anthony is going to the food pantry in St. Clairsville.
That's great.
Oh, we have a couple more people join us. Okay. So moving right along, I know no one really wants to go to 4 o'clock, so I'm trying to keep things snapping along. Let's talk a little bit about designing instructional materials. Okay. So you should now see on your screen the PowerPoint. And I'll switch it to the full screen mode. So this, I think, is in part a review, a part a discussion, and a lot of just kind of general tips. If you guys on the phone have any tips, just feel free to say them. And for you guys on the computer, if you type them into chat, Evan can read them out.
Yes, make sure that if you type a question into the chat box in WebEx, make sure that you mark it to be sent either directly to me, you can choose me from the drop-down, or choose all participants, that way I can see it. If you send it to Mandy, she's not going to be able to see it because she's got her full screen for her PowerPoint. So either send them to my attention or to all participants, and I will make sure to ask the question on your behalf.
So we'll get started with a review. You know, what types of materials can be created? I mean, there's all different kinds of stuff, but to kind of lump them in categories, we have handouts, we have activity sheets, there's tutorials, you know, videos, either like a screencast video or a video of somebody doing something. And we also have lesson plans and manuals. And I was thinking to myself, what's the difference between like a manual and a tutorial? To my mind, a tutorial is like really brief. It's just like how to do this one particular thing, and a manual is like exhaustive. It's like everything you ever wanted to know about Windows 8 or, you know, whatever topic.
Kind of like those big binders we gave you at orientation. They were quite exhaustive.
Yes, that is a manual. And also we have, of course, slideshows like the one I'm creating right now. You know, just because you're designing materials, I almost never anymore start completely from scratch. You know, I look around and see what other people have done. I ask other trainers. Of course, you always want to have some sort of evaluation, even if it's just one you have in your own mind. I think about, you know, when was the last time this was updated? Is this a quality person? If you know, if it comes directly from a person, then you can think, okay, I know so-and-so created it. But you want to kind of think, okay, is the organization that created this, is this reputable, or is it, you know, just some Joe Schmo that I've never heard of? And then coverage. Is this what I want to cover, or do I just want to cover a small segment? So some places that I've found, of course, you guys will all be able to use the you know, PowerPoints and handouts, etc., that we gave you on your flash drive. But there's some other places that I like to go, and I'll send these links out to you later so that you won't have to write them down. But one I've recently learned about is this technology training wheel. It's a wiki. If you haven't used a wiki before, it's a collaborative website where you have multiple users editing different pages. The one that everybody knows about is Wikipedia. But this particular wiki is focused on technology training. So it has, when I talk about the Joe Schmoes, you'll see like a kind of a continuum, I guess you'd say, a wide range of skill levels. You'll see some people who post things and their stuff is excellent on here, and you'll see some people who you're just kind of like, ugh, what? So there's a wide range on this one, but it's a good place to start. One I really like and have used a lot is this Google site. The New York Public Library actually put all of their technology handouts online.
Wow.
It's not on their regular website, which I think is just like nypl.org. It's on this Google site, but they have excellent handouts, and I really like the way that they're structured. I really encourage you to take a look. They have all different kinds of topics, and like a wide range, but they all have to do with technology in some aspect or another. And then finally, WebJunction. Some of you may have taken classes from WebJunction before. I believe I forwarded some of their webinars that they do. WebJunction is a online, it's a website that has everything to do with libraries. So all of the materials on there are from other libraries or created by WebJunction themselves, who are a nonprofit. They also have a lot of good tips on there. Some of their teaching materials, I've noticed, are getting a little bit older. They haven't really updated them in the past maybe year, 2 years, but they still have some really excellent tips. So if you're just struggling with a particular aspect, like, oh, how can I market my classes better, or how can I reach, seniors better, I would take a look at some of the different tips that they have. For you guys on the call and on the computer, do you have any websites that you like to go to find instructional materials?
CCF Learn Free is the one that I use.
That's Goodwill, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about them.
Can you say it one more time? What was it?
GCSLearnFree.org.
Okay, thank you.
Always Maganga has a lot.
Always Maganga. Oh, neat.
Just Maganga. It's, let me see if I can find it. Keep it on the list. www.maganga.com.
Interesting. Another one that I like, they don't have lesson plans, but they have short videos, is Common Craft. You do have to pay at some point to use a lot of their videos, but they have a lot that are up on YouTube right now that you can just go ahead and use. And they're really good at explaining some of the more difficult concepts, like how the internet works or how wireless works. Anything from chat, Evan?
Let's see. I do not see anything sent to all participants. Remember, if you do have a question, please make sure you send it to all participants or directly to me through the chat box so that I can let Mandy know. And I don't see anything at this time.
Okay. I always encourage everyone to put things up on the Google Plus site if you do find other places that have really good stuff that help inspire your classes. One tip I would give you is to think a little bit about copyright before you use someone else's work. If you're using works from another library or government entity, all works that are created by tax-supported institutions are typically out of copyright. So, any public library is tax-supported, so there's not going to be usually a copyright that applies unless it's done by like the Friends Foundation. But just something to know, if you're using something from you know, Goodwill or Common Craft, they'll usually put what their particular restrictions are. You know, because we're not using these for a profit enterprise, and in an educational setting, it's generally covered by, why am I blanking on the term here?
It's covered by fair use?
Fair use, yes. It's generally covered by fair use. That being said, I would always say where you got the material from.
It never hurts to just put, you know, just in small type, somewhere on your slide or presentation or handout, it never hurts to just put a little, you know, used from, or, you know, downloaded from such and such. We did have another suggestion from one of the group. Nani had a great reminder for everyone, don't discount YouTube for great ideas for content, for training, for even handouts. You know, if you want to take something digital and make it analog, there's nothing wrong with that. But she especially likes to use it with programs such as Excel, things that are a little more complicated. If she can include a little bit of video clips with it, that's where she goes. So YouTube, don't forget about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have used YouTube on several occasions, especially when you've already tried written instructions and those don't work. Sometimes just seeing someone do it on YouTube will be very helpful. Both for your own edification and the patrons, I would say. Oh, and the other thing to mention about copyright is it doesn't just apply to the, you know, PowerPoint things themselves, but also to think about it if you're using pictures. You know, oftentimes, you know, I'll look for images that have, you know, a person sitting at a computer or, you know, something like that. Make sure you also just say, you know, who that website came from. If you haven't done screenshots that you do yourself, I mean, those are, you don't need to cite, but just a note to do a screenshot on your keyboard. You'll typically, unless you have a different keyboard, there's a weird button in the upper right, and it says PRT SRN or SCN. That stands for print screen. So if you hit print screen, that takes a snapshot of the whole screen. If you hit the Alt key and then hit print screen, that only takes a screenshot of your active window. So those are a couple tips that I use for taking screenshots. And the other thing I really like is on both Windows, at least on Windows 7, I haven't used Windows 8 enough to know, but there's a program called Snip in Windows 7 that'll let you take a screenshot of a particular area, which is very helpful if you just want to direct people. You know, say you're using Microsoft Word and you only want to direct people to the fonts part of the screen. You can get the snip and then select that part of the screen. But that's not about copyright. I just got on was thinking.
There's one other tip for using screenshots that I just recently learned. This is Caitlin, by the way.
Yes.
If you actually go into the program, so you're using like PowerPoint, say, if you go to the Insert tab, there's actually right by where it says enter like a picture or a clip art or something, there's a screenshot button.
Oh, let's look. Okay.
Click that. It actually lets you pick like what else you have open that you want a screenshot of, and then it only does that window, so you don't get anything else from what's on your screen.
Look at that.
Because when you do print screen, a lot of times you'll get, like if you have the bar at the bottom up or something like that, you'll get that in it. If you go into PowerPoint and say insert screenshot, you don't get any of that.
Oh, look at that. That's a great tip. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's see, another question has come in. This one is about copyright.
Sure.
Let's see. Let's see here. Does 10% fair use still apply? I was taught that any educational context, only 10% of the item may be used unless permission from the publisher. In other words, the full source could not be used. Is that correct or incorrect?
I think that's a good rule of thumb. I'm not an attorney, and so I can't give you specific advice, but I would say that if it's not illegal, it is unsavory to copy an entire someone else's work and present it as your own. But at this, I mean, on our level, I don't think we will have too many issues with it. I've never heard of a library be sued for copyright violation, but it's just more something to be aware of. Any other?
Nope. No more questions in my chat box as of this moment.
Okay, moving right along. So the next thing, you know, a lot of us wonder, this always happens to me, you know, how do I know what my patrons need? We've all had the experience, or if you haven't yet, I'm sad to say you probably will at some point, where you hear a lot of patrons say that they want a particular class, and so, you know, for me, I forget what it was. But I say Microsoft Word. So like 5 patrons come in, they all say, we want a Microsoft Word class, we want a Microsoft Word class, and you say to yourself, okay, patrons, I'm going to get you this Microsoft Word class. So you put it all together and you make it, you know, you make it great. You make it your magnum opus and you hold it and nobody comes. So there's no fail-safe, but here are some kind of tips to help you think about what do my patrons want and how do I know. One idea that I thought was pretty good is you can have a clipboard or a little sheet, or you could just ask everyone at the end of class, what are some other classes that you'd like to see? I think this clipboard is also helpful for you because a lot of times people will say things, you know, make suggestions towards the end of class, you know, come up to you as a presenter and you don't have time to really think about them, but perhaps if you can jot them down, then you can think about them later. If you haven't yet interviewed the library staff and the library staff at that location, and especially the people at the front desk, whether that be a circulation desk or reference desk, I would ask them what they hear. This is another good one. So keep track of what kind of questions are asked of you of one-on-one. And you know, you already have a sense of this just from doing it, but I would take the time to kind of methodically write it down right after you do the one-on-one. Because I think this is true of me, and I think it's true of a lot of people that, you know, ask me what was said 2 hours after that one-on-one, and I'll maybe have a vague sense. I'm like, oh, I think we talked about Word, but I don't remember specifics. So I would encourage you right after the one-on-one, write down what exactly the patron wanted to know. And if you see, you know, a trend emerge, people keep asking for the same thing, like over a month span, then you'll know, okay, that's something that people say they want. Another place to go, sometimes we'll do computer programs because they'll fit in with the library's overall strategic plan. So if your library does have a strategic plan, I would encourage you to you know, take a look. If you don't know if your library has a strategic plan, I would ask. I mean, you know, it's not a secret, or at least it shouldn't be. It should be, you know, a living document about what direction the library is going. And then also your Library Edge assessment. You've all taken the Library Edge assessment. You all saw it had different suggestions for different types of programs to be offered, like financial literacy and health literacy and all different kinds of things. So think to yourself, okay, what on that assessment did my library score in low in? And does that fit somehow into digital literacy? And it's okay if it doesn't, but it's another good place to kind of think about other things that you could do. And this, I guess, is more of a question for you. There is a space on the post-test for comments. Do you see a lot of patron comments come in through the post-test or on the one-on-one form?
I don't see very many. Most of them, I can't think of what they might want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is that similar for other folks?
It is for me too. I usually have to write on it myself, just because it's obvious that they needed something when they asked me the thing that they needed me to help them with. So at least I put that on there because they did need that. But so they're getting on there. They're just half of them end up to be put on by me.
Mm.
Most of my comments, they say no or everything.
Yeah, no, like I didn't need any help. I didn't just ask you for help, which is silly because I just did.
Right. Do they literally
mind
say
it at all anymore? I really don't mind it at all anymore. It's just part of what we do.
Yeah. Do they literally say everything on the form? They just write the word everything?
Yes.
I've seen that happen a lot.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
So I think you're right. I mean, they must just not have, like, any particular need. Anything from the chat, Evan?
Anthony,
I've had people come to a class and tell me that they needed something, and then they sit through part of the class and say, oh, this is what I needed instead. And since often there are only one or two people, it's easy to just switch into that topic instead. But some of them don't realize what they really needed until they came to the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's a kind of a trend with people is I mean, you just don't know what you don't know. And if you're just learning computers, then you don't know what to ask.
Sure. And like I think it was maybe 2 in-person meetings ago where we were talking about the personality types of folks who attend classes, and so you've got kind of, it's a double-edged sword, because you've got people who severely underestimate their own skills, and then you've got people who also severely overestimate their own skills, where it's more like, I don't know, it can cause confusion in a classroom because they come in with very different expectations, not only of what's being delivered to them, but of their own skill set. Let's see, we've got another comment. Okay, so Rachel says that sometimes she has a difficult time getting patrons to talk about the classes that they want, but they do tend to use the section as a comment section on the evaluation form. So they put in general comments instead of maybe the actual classes that they, if I'm understanding that correctly. So what Anthony says that he verbally asks the class when it's over, asked them if there's anything else that they wanted to learn about, and then either went on to another subject there, either on the spot or took that information for later.
That's great. Yeah, great idea. So the next part, learning objectives. So this is, I don't really care for the term learning objectives, especially for this type of training, as it's not like we're not in a formal educational setting here. It's more casual. But it's just, I think whenever you're doing any class, even if it's jotted notes or you have it set in your mind to define, what skills and knowledge should people walk out the door having, and what do you really want to do in this training. So, it's kind of a review. Evan and I were joking about how many acronyms, are in this. But one you can use is SMART, which can be used in a variety of different settings. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. But what that really just means is, can someone realistically do this task in an hour or 2 hours? So once you have that, you have set in your brain, okay, I want to do this class, this is what I want people to walk away with. I would really encourage you to develop an outline. I think of it as like my roadmap. It's good to know where I'm going, but there's always times you have to change it along the way. And those detours aren't necessarily bad. So, I mean, sometimes a tangent can take you way off track, but you just have to, it's good to map out where you're kind of going. I like to link the outline to objectives in creating like chunks of content. That way I know, like, say I'm doing one on Microsoft Word, and I have some true beginners in the class, and so my one learning objective that I wanted to do is taking 10 times twice as long as I thought that it would take. That way I can just kind of scratch out, some other things I wanted to do. And you can kind of move these different chunks around. This is only one way to do it. It's the way I like to do it, but there are different ways to think about it. And like we talked about last time, think about those different learning styles. Think about when we talked about active training techniques, think about different ways to do it. But here's how I like to develop my outline. I put in the title, what do I want this to be called, the length, 1 hour, 2 hours, and then the goal. The goal, I think, is a little bit different from a learning objective. It's more of like where we're going with this whole thing rather than one specific thing. So say I'm doing Microsoft Word for beginners. My goal may be just for everyone to walk out having typed one sentence in Microsoft Word, or to make them feel comfortable with Microsoft Word. And to get to that place, we might have different smaller learning objectives. And then the description is just mostly for PR. How am I going to sell this to people? Who am I trying to sell it to? Is it for seniors? Is it for job seekers? Who's the kind of audience? Which leads us to the next one. I mean, you can think of audience not only in terms of demographic, but like how many people do you want? The rule of thumb is never have any more than 8 people in a beginner's class. But you might even want it lower than that if it's if you have 8 people who are struggling to learn a mouse, that is too much for one person.
Yeah, that's what I was just getting ready to say, especially if you don't have a helper or a volunteer for that class, you might want to even drop it down further.
The prerequisites, I would always try to state this in the marketing as well, what people should already know when they take this class. Otherwise, you might get people in an Excel class who have not yet, learn to use the computer or know the computer parts. I mean, the thing is, I've always had, and Evan is nodding here too, mixed success with that. You can put in your marketing what exactly prerequisites you expect people to have, but
it goes back to that mindset where you have a subset of your patrons overestimate their own skills, and there's really not too much you can do about that, except, maybe with your prerequisites, get a little more specific than normal. So instead of saying something like, I'm just kind of shooting off the cuff here, so let's just say maybe you're teaching a Word class and the prerequisite is knows how to type. Maybe you need to be more specific about, words per minute, or, with a particular style, or maybe even provide a link to a typing tutor in advance to get that number. I don't know. Again, that's just spitballing, but I think if you can be a little more specific in the prerequisites, it might help, but you're still going to end up, unfortunately, with people who have overestimated their own skills.
And then you want to get into this. Sorry, did we have a comment? Okay. So then you want to get into your specific learning objectives. So this is, when you think of it like if you're using the roadmap metaphor, where are the places you're going to stop in order to get to your destination? So we're trying to make people comfortable with Microsoft Word. So maybe I want to start by just introducing the different, what's the ribbon, where do you type in Microsoft Word, how do you save? So those would all be different learning objectives. Number 1, introduce the ribbon. Number 2, show them where to type. Number 3, show them where to save. I remember showing people where to save was a big problem when they introduced one of the versions of Office, because it went from being very intuitive, or at least more intuitive where people would save, to you had to click a flashing button. Do you guys remember this? Do you remember which version of Office that was?
I don't.
2007?
Maybe.
Also, you want to write out the materials needed, not only for the students, but also for yourself. You know, what do you need to have set up? Is there anything special you need to do? Just to kind of plan it out. And then, you know, list what considerations for delivering training or dealing with audience. So any software that they need. And then you get into your class schedule. In this one, it's very detailed. You have an introduction and you say what time and you have an activity. Typically, I don't make it as specific as that with the introduction and conclusion. If I think of something really cool that I've seen other people do, like I want to start off with a brainstorm, or I want to start off with, you know, a round robin where everyone introduces themselves, I might list that in here, but typically I do more for the learning objectives. What exactly do I want them to do? How long do I expect it to take? And this is what I mean when I say chunking out the content, because, again, I may think to myself, okay, I'm only going to spend 15 minutes describing the ribbon in Microsoft Word to everybody, but then we get to talking and, you know, someone has a lot of questions, or, you know, we get off on a tangent, and that may quickly turn into 25 minutes. And then I'll just drop off one of the other chunks. So when you guys are creating an outline for classes, which do you think is most important? Like, which of these steps? Okay, I'm not hearing much. I'm going to assume everyone is busy pondering. Or none of them very important. Is there one you always skip?
What you want to teach them, because once you figure out what you're hoping that they learn, then you sort of work back from there to think, okay, then how do I want them to learn that? What might be the best way? Mm-hmm. And then that can sort of inform, well, how long might it take them to learn that? So probably what you want people to get out of the class is probably where I start usually. Okay. I don't know.
No, that's good.
A couple suggestions that came in the chat box. Most important, just covering the basics of the topic, and also mapping out the materials needed is most important. Yep.
What are things you frequently skip, or do you skip the whole outline process and you dive in?
I think I do it. I just don't do it quite as structured.
Sure.
When I'm thinking of a class, I tend to write out the description, but the description tends to list the objectives. So I don't necessarily sit down and write what I call objectives, but it's in there. And then as I create the class, I make sure that I'm covering everything that I have in the description that I'm telling the patrons that they'll learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing that's easy to miss sometimes is to make sure that you've planned extra, because even if you've done a class before and it's taken, if you planned for an hour and it's taken an hour, if you get a different group of people who are maybe just at a slightly higher skill level, or you have fewer people show up for the class, you can power through material in like half the time sometimes.
Yeah.
So to have like extra exercises that helps them sort of solidify the skills, or extra things to talk about that take them a little bit more in depth. I think it's important to have those, and it's really easy sometimes to, I think, to sort of depend on what you've done before, or to sort of forget to do that part.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on my own trainings, and I would say that's true, because you can have the same material to two different groups, and one will take 40 minutes, and the other will take like an hour and a half. So it is always important to have those extras.
Yeah, and know what you can cut out, too.
Right.
Because it can go the other way as well.
Absolutely.
Attendee asking a question. It's from James. James says, I believe I am muted. Do you show me if having joined the show?
Okay, hang on, everybody. I'm just going to... James, if we are having people call in, I will put in the chat the phone number. To call in.
All right, so I have another comment coming in on the chat here. Let's see. It looks like this one's from Nani. Nani says she has a complete one-on-one session prepared based on what they told me was needed, and then found out that I needed to go in a different direction. So, for example, a lady told me she didn't know how to do anything on the computer, but when I met with her, all she wanted to know was how to download music online.
Oh, interesting.
And so I kind of think what we're getting at there is that also the need to be flexible too when, developing this roadmap, so to speak. There will certainly be instances like this where even despite all your best efforts to explain, precisely about what's going to happen, things will change on a dime. Patrons, the public, they're unpredictable, and I think as long as we can try to keep a good humor about ourselves and be as flexible as we can, I think that's great. And if it's in a classroom setting where something like this happens and it's maybe too distracting or disruptive to the rest, we can always work to set up a one-on-one with them after the fact or have them stay later. You don't have to throw out the whole baby with the bathwater that way.
Absolutely. Changing gears just a little bit, most classes, and I think one-on-ones, and frankly just sometimes when you're stationed, if your library has you at a desk, we rely a lot on handouts. So I did want to talk a little bit specifically about handouts.
Oh, really quick, before we go on, sorry.
Okay, sure.
I missed one other, sorry, Mandy. Rachel has a really good point. She mentioned that for her, the most important step that sometimes she tends to forget is the practice step.
Oh, yes.
And so she says sometimes she gets really nervous, and which makes her kind of go through material a little faster. I think when we all get nervous, we start to talk really fast and we want to get through it really quick. And so that's certainly not unique, and it's a great reminder. And maybe another reason why using a roadmap such as this can help you, because you can pace yourself a little better. It gives you something to kind of go over at the beginning of the class to set the tone not only for the attendees, but maybe even just for yourself as well.
So I know we are bumping up close to 2. So just really quick, what are some things that you think handouts, going back to the handouts again, I'm sorry, are really good for? Like what kinds of information?
I try to
like reinforce what you taught them in the class, so if they want to practice it, how they can refer to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I tend to use them as a step-by-step sheet, especially for older patrons. And if I don't have like a formal handout that I made for a class, and a lot of my one-on-ones, I realize that they might forget by the next week that they see me. So I'll just jot like the steps down quickly, and they all tend to really appreciate having that to go back, because even though they sometimes go through it 3 times and they remember, a day or 2 from then they'll forget. Mm-hmm.
Excellent, yeah. So they're good to reinforce, good for step-by-steps. And from chat, what comments do we have?
We've got a couple good comments from chat about helpful handouts. Let me see. Going back a little bit, Matthew says it's really helpful in terms of finding the resources that he had once spoken on, so that he can refer back to that. Let's see. Notes that may or may not have been taken in the class. That's interesting. That's a good point. Let's see. Oh, and along the same lines, Nani says she uses a half-sheet handout, and then the bottom part leaves open for them to take notes on or write sign-ins and passwords on. Rachel says she tries to get a step-by-step guide to go along with what she's talking about so that they can take them with them and try it themselves at home.
Yeah.
All excellent.
Excellent. But let me ask you this. What are handouts not very helpful for? Why can't we rely solely, not slowly.
Slowly.
Why can't we rely solely on handouts?
Oh, Mandy, because each computer is a little bit different. Each library is a little bit different to get on them, so that getting started, getting into the program you might be working on, everything's different, and so hands-on is, one-on-one right in front of your face is always necessary.
Absolutely. That personal touch. The handouts aren't adaptable, obviously, they're static.
Let's see. Oh shoot! Every time someone sends a good comment, everything moves up a line. Let's see. Nani says what are they not helpful when they have too much information on the handout, and then people get scared away or don't want to read them. Matthew brings up a good point. If the handouts are really poor at providing the step-by-step instruction, maybe it leaves out a step or makes some vague comments instead of specifically stating how to do something, that can be a problem. Anthony mentions when the handouts are not up to date, of course, that's great. Rachel mentions if the handouts are a little too in-depth, sometimes patrons will try to read along with them instead of focusing on the instruction that's happening in the class, and that's a really good point as well. It's hard to find that balance between just enough for them, but not so much that their heads are down while you're talking to them because they're enthralled in the in the handout.
An enthralling handout.
Yes, we all aspire to an enthralling handout.
Which is good segue to my next point that I'm just going to go through the next part quick. Some tips to create effective handouts. Only use one type of font. Sometimes you might use a different font for the header, like the top of the page, then for the body, but never use more than 3, and I would even say 3 is pushing it. Don't use the font Comic Sans. Comic Sans is like sometimes people use it when they want to look cute or jokey, but No, just don't. It's kind of a joke in some very nerdy circles who care about fonts. People make fun of Comic Sans. The next one is really important, though. Use a legible font size. Depending on the font you use, never use one that's smaller than 10. 12 is probably better. If you have a class where you know you'll have a lot of seniors, or you generally get a lot of seniors, I would even make it the font as big as 14 for the body. Use color, if you have access to a color printer, but, use it sparingly. Also, clip art, very sparingly. Resize graphics correctly. Sometimes this happens to me, and I don't even notice it, where I'll take a screenshot and then I think, oh, I want to make that, a lot bigger, and so I blow it up. And on the screen, it looks fine, but when I print it out, it looks pixelated. You can see kind of the little blocks of pixels. So just think about that, about printing it off one time before you make a whole set of copies to make sure the graphics do appear correctly. And then you guys all have mentioned this already, but try not to put too much information on it, because you want enough so that the patron can accomplish their task, but not so much that they become overwhelmed or end up not reading it. And then real quick, my tip on revising in reflecting is, I think this is another thing that people often skip, but try to carve out, and it doesn't have to be, extensive, but take 10 minutes like the next day after you've done a training and think, okay, what about that went really well? What about that kind of stumbled, or, that I could clean up a little bit more? And just write it down. I think there's never been a truly perfect training in the history of time. There's always some way to improve a different resource, a different way of explaining something. So I would always just take 5 minutes of your day and reflect and write it down. I think it does really do something mentally when you can look back and say, okay, remember at my last word class, people had a lot of questions what I meant when I said the word ribbon, even though that's the official term. Is there another way I could explain that?
Mm-hmm. Almost like a little diary of sorts. I mean, it doesn't have to be quite as lengthy as what you might think a diary is or a journal, but just a bullet point or two about kind of how you thought that you did is really helpful, like Mandy said, when it comes to reflection. Okay. So I know I breezed through the last part of that a little bit, but I did want to make sure we stayed on schedule. So I'm going to stop the sharing now. It's just going to take 1 minute.